Good afternoon and welcome to Ava Downey's Senior Project Exhibition. My name is Debbie Ostofsky and I'm her senior seminar teacher and her advisor. In just a moment I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves, but a few reminders before we get started. The first being no eating or drinking during Ava's presentation. Please make sure if you have a cell phone that you have turned it off or made it silent so that there are no unexpected distractions. No flash photography. We ask that you stay in the room for the entirety of Ava's presentation. But if there's an emergency and you do have to leave the room, please do so as quietly as possible. We then ask that you don't return to the room until after Ava is done presenting and the jury has left for its deliberations. In a moment, Ava will present for between 30 and 60 minutes on her year of learning and the experiences that she's had. The panel will have the first opportunity to ask her questions, and then we will offer her some warm feedback before we go to our deliberations. Once we leave, we strongly encourage the audience to ask additional questions of Ava and to offer further congratulatory remarks. Tommy, if you'll start the introductions.
Hi, I'm Tommy here with Junior Department.
Hi, I'm Francis. I'm a Spanish teacher.
Hi, I'm Julie Bremer. My daughter's a freshman in this room.
Hi, I'm Ann Walsh. My 3 kids graduated from
Hi, I'm Christina Pinto. My son's a grader.
Hi guys, I'm Ava Downey, as a lot of you hopefully already know, and I did my senior project on how can I create an Amazon Alexa skill. Logged myself out. There you go. So, creating an Amazon Alexa skill actually wasn't my first project idea. I wanted to start out by creating an iPhone app, as I had an iPhone and it was something I was really familiar with. I had a lot of pros and cons associated with this skill, many of the draws being that, one, I would be able to code, which was something I always knew that I really wanted to do. I really like coding in my free time, and I knew that I would want to bring it into my senior project. And I also wanted something that I would be able to share with my friends and family. I didn't want to have to do something that I would do for my senior project and then kind of forget about. I wanted it to have a lasting impact, and I wanted it to be a fun and exciting impact, so I wanted that thing that I would do to be lighthearted, which I knew I would be able to do with an iPhone app. I did not end up going this route, as it also had a couple of negatives, the main one being that it would have cost me a lot of money to do such a thing. I have a Chromebook, so in order to create an iPhone app, you would need to get a MacBook, which would be super expensive, and then upon that, I would also have to buy a developer license, which is also fairly expensive, and I just didn't feel like it was worth it to spend that much money. And I also would have to worry about graphics, which I didn't really want to focus on, as I wanted to, again, focus more on the code than the visual aspect. So this brought me to Amazon Alexa development because it pretty much got rid of all of the cons that I saw in iPhone app development and made them good. So to begin with, it is pretty much completely free for me to do. The only thing that I needed to buy was my Amazon Alexa, which was something that I had already wanted and I had been trying to convince my mom to let me get for a while. She finally let me get it because I would be using it for my senior project, and she just kind of caved, so I was super excited about that. And I also wouldn't have to worry about the graphics, as it was all voice-based. So I also found a couple of other pros to creating an Amazon Alexa skill, one of which was that it was a rising technology, so there was a lot of space for me to do something cool that nobody's done before, as it's something that's only been out for a couple of years. And I just thought it would be a lot cooler and more beneficial to me than iPhone app development. Again, I really, really, really wanted to be coding a lot in my senior project. It was one of the biggest things that I came into this year knowing that I wanted to do. I decided that over the summer, and I wanted to make something super fun and exciting, as I don't like to be serious all the time. I can be serious when I need to, but I like having fun a lot, and I felt like this was a good time for me to have fun in my presentation. And I wanted it to be able to share with my friends, which is something that I knew I would be able to do with an Amazon Alexa skill. So you might be wondering, what is an Amazon Alexa? And simply put, it's a cloud-based voice service. So it runs your commands through all of the Amazon stuff happening in the background and then sends it back to you based on what it thinks should go back. And you activate it by saying Alexa and then the commands. So for example, you can say Alexa, play Despacito, which is a pretty popular one as it was a meme. And Alexa would run through the whole process and then start to play Despacito for you, which is really cool. And it's just completely hands-free in that sense that you can just use your voice to control anything that you want, and it's just super innovative, and I found it super exciting. So when you are trying to get Alexa to process something, it goes through a lot of steps. None of it is really done inside of your tiny Amazon Alexa, as it's all done outside at the Amazon HQ specified in your skill. So the first thing it does is listen for you to say Alexa, which prompts it to start recording what you're saying, which it then listens until you're done and encrypts it down into a smaller file that it is then able to send to Alexa. And then Alexa is then able to process that in their little database through your skills, and then find a response that they think fits your request very well, and they will send it back to your Alexa, which it then speaks out at you and goes back to listening and speaking for you to invoke the skill again. And it also needs a Wi-Fi signal, as none of this is done locally, it's all done elsewhere. So it makes sense to need to connect it to the Wi-Fi because it needs to be able to actually send the encryption out. An Amazon Alexa skill is basically just a fancy way that Amazon likes to say app or application. It comes with a lot of specific skills that you might want, many of these being what's the news, what's the weather, what's the time. But not everything that you might want is included within your Alexa, so you can always go into the Skills and Game Store and download something of your own, which is where my skill will end up going, as well as many other skills such as Jeopardy, which isn't really something that a lot of people think about when they think of Alexa, so it's something that you have to download. And again, it needs to be hands-free, so it's super important. That's why I keep saying it, is that it's one of the main things that Amazon really puts across when they're trying to tell their developers what they can and can't do, is that they want it to be hands-free. So say, for example, you're trying to make Christmas dinner. Your whole family's in the living room just opening presents, and you are frantically trying to get dinner done before like 10 o'clock at night. You're trying to put your ham in the oven, but your hands are all full of like ham grease and stuff, and you do not want to touch your phone because then it would be gross. So this is when you would go and you would use your Alexa and be like, Alexa, set a timer for 4 hours, and it just saves you so much hassle, which I think is super cool, and it's just good in that way. A lot of these skills fall into different categories, basically being game skills, kid-friendly skills, content skills, music skills, and habit-forming skills. These are kind of just the general categories that Amazon puts on their website to split the skills up, but they all have their own little subcategories, which I'm not going to get super into. But basically, a game skill is a skill that is a game, so Jeopardy. Kid-friendly skills are meant for kids, so they tend to be kind of educational yet exciting so that the kids stay engaged. Content skills, which is what I ended up focusing on for my project, is pretty much just a catch-all skill. It is when you are delivering content to the user, whether this be a quote or a fact or the news. Music skills are what you would think of when you think of music, so Spotify, Pandora, things like that. And then habit-forming skills would encapsulate your reminders. And there's also a really cool skill that I was able to find called Time Spent, and that lets you tell Alexa how much time you're spending doing specific things, and she'll try to modify your day by telling you reminders and stuff of what you should be doing so that you can be more productive. And I thought that was pretty cool. And once I had all of this research done, I knew that I kind of wanted a little bit something more, and at this point I had been getting emails from Amazon telling me about all of their products and stuff that they wanted me to buy. But one of the things that stood out to me was this thing called AWS reInvent, which is basically just a conference that they were holding. It happens every single year, so they're actually starting to take tickets for it right now. They're trying to get me to go. But I was pretty late into this, so I was not able to go, as I really only started hearing about it in November when it was happening. But it happened in Vegas, and I was very lucky that they were live streaming the whole thing on Twitch.tv, which I conveniently had an account for because they stream a lot of video games on there. And I was able to watch it and actually get the whole experience of being there, and I didn't have to take a bunch of time out of my day or spend a bunch of money to do that. But the only thing that I had to do was that Twitch.tv is actually blocked on the school Wi-Fi, and this was a thing that was happening during school. So don't tell the IT guys, but I downloaded a VPN and watched it pretty illegally in the corner. But that's a hush-hush thing, so don't tell them. And this was actually a really cool experience, except for that most of it went over my head, and I found it to largely be an ad for Amazon's products. And I didn't really get a lot out of it, but I knew that there was a lot of stuff that I would be able to learn in the future, so it got me super excited. I also was able to take down a couple of names and resources that I wanted to check out further so I could understand what they were saying in this live stream. So I was able to do that, and I moved on. So after this, I was super, super, super excited to actually start making my own skills. And I had been talking with one of the IT guys here at school named Wesley, and he had helped me find this thing called Hour of Code, which is put on by Amazon affiliates. And it basically took me through making a skill start to finish in about an hour. And I made a skill that told me facts about my school. It wasn't super the experience that I was looking for, as I was just filling in the blanks of code instead of actually writing out the code myself. It was all done in a browser. But I was able to get a lot of the foundation for what I was doing later on. So it really helped me, and I feel like I learned a lot from it. And I knew that this was not really going to help me start actually making a skill completely from scratch. It was really good, as in kind of getting a little bit of an overview, but I didn't really know where to go next. I was really lucky, as we had actually just had this thing called Community Connections Night here at school, where I was able to meet a lot of really helpful people. One of the people that I met was Julie Marin, so Julie Marin's mom. It was pretty cool. She works at a company called Mobiquity, and they actually create Amazon Alexa skills, which was something that I totally was not expecting, as it's not a super popular thing to be doing, but it was super welcome, and I was able to reach out to her and actually get some advice. So I went into her office, and she had set up a whole little interview thing for me to go through. So I went in the morning, and I got all dressed up, and I was super nervous, sitting in her office, and she introduced me to a lot of the people that she works with. So they were telling me a lot about what they do in their day-to-day life. So I learned about the skills that they've been making. One of the cool ones that I heard from them was that they had made a Purina dog skill, which finds you a breed that would fit your needs. And they basically told me that that skill had taken them an insanely long time and so much effort, and that I would not really be able to do something like that. But I knew I wanted to do something cool, and they were like, oh yeah, like you can totally make a skill, but I would start really small. But I kind of just brushed that aside, which is probably not a great idea. But I did it anyway, and I was like, I'm gonna make something super cool. I'm gonna go over the top. I'm just gonna like really buckle down and do this. And I basically did not listen to their advice, but in the advice that I did listen to, they basically told me the overall skill process of creating an Amazon Alexa skill. So that was super helpful, because I had finally gotten like the little push in the direction that I needed to actually get started creating my own skill. So I did that. And they also were able to tell me a lot of the challenges associated with creating an Amazon Alexa skill. The main one, again, being that it takes an extremely long time to create something cool, sometimes a couple of years with a giant team behind it. But again, I probably should have listened to this, but I didn't really do that. And they also told me a lot of the difficulties that they experience in their process day to day about the Alexa itself, as it's still a new technology. There's only a couple versions out, and it's still super new. So Amazon itself is working out some bugs with the voice recognition and stuff like that. And also, I would need to be wary of being able to find articles and stuff to help me throughout the process, and being able to find people to talk to, as there's not too many people doing it right now, because again, it's still a rising technology. Again, I was able to figure out the general steps of creating a skill. I'm just going to gloss over them now, as I'm going to go more in depth when I bring you through my actual creation of my skill. But basically, the first thing that you do is come up with a goal, because you need to know a direction. Then you make an outline encapsulating what you want to get done in your skill. You get feedback on it from your friends and family, in my case, because I was doing it for myself. And then I would revise that outline based on the feedback that I had gotten from all of my friends and family. I would then take that and start writing code little piece by piece. so that I can actually get a working skill, but not super specific because I wanted to be able to then gather more feedback from my friends and family again and make a new skill based on that incorporation of feedback, which I would then be able to publish to the Skills and Games store. In order to start actually creating my skill, I needed a couple of accounts. So the main one that I ended up using was Amazon Developer Console. And this serves as the main website for creating an Amazon Alexa skill. It's where the meat of the code would go, if you say. And it's pretty much where the code that actually tells my skill what to do is. But I also needed an Amazon Web Services account because that is where I tell my skill like how to open. So it's what the Amazon, my Alexa listens to tell it to open. So that was super important, and they work together so that I can actually create a functioning skill. If I only had one or the other, I would not have anything done right now because it just would not work. I also needed to decide what language I wanted to program my skill in, which actually I had a lot of deliberation with. I originally wanted to program it in a language that I didn't already know, but after talking to the people at Mobiquity and talking to Debbie, they had told me that I should probably go a little easier on myself. So I decided on Python for a lot of reasons. The main reason being that I already knew a little bit of it, as I like to do a lot of projects on the side, and I knew a little bit, but there was definitely a lot for me to learn in the process, which I definitely found out. And also that Python is one of the most popular languages right now, so I knew there would be a lot of sources that I would be able to find to help me in my process. And then I also had to write a file as a JSON file, because that is how I get my code up into the Amazon Web Services portal, which is where I am able to invoke or open my skill. And I didn't have any experience with JSON at all, but I was able to find a place where I could just kind of copy and paste what I needed into their outline and just kind of understand it from looking at it. So it wasn't too bad for me. Since I was using Python as my main language, I also needed a place to write my code in. I already had PyCharm, as again, I was creating my own little things before. And I decided to just roll with it, because one, I already had it, I didn't really need to download anything new. And two, I knew how to use it, so I knew it was going to be reliable at catching my bugs and things like that. And I knew it would also be able to write my JSON files, not quite as accurately as my Python files, as it is built to catch Python bugs, but it still worked very well. So this led me to my fourth experience, which is when I did an Alexa skill development course. This is basically something that I found online on Udemy for about $5. I really rushed into this experience as it was like 90% off and I felt like I needed to get it. I didn't really think about what I was getting into or actually the logistics of the course. I kind of just got it and was like, yep, I got this. I'm done. I found something. I can't wait to get started. And once I started actually looking at the course, I kind of realized that was a little bit of a mistake. The guy who does the course has a very strong Indian accent, which I found very hard to follow. And I also had the problem of having to flip back and forth in my computer between his tutorial, where he was telling me what to do, and my workspace, where I was trying to copy what he was telling me what to do. So I kind of gave up on that a little bit. And I also was not able to be super productive at school, as I was only even able to work on this course at my house on my desktop at home, because at school I have a Chromebook, which is not super useful for a lot of things. It's pretty much a glorified phone with a keyboard. And I needed a way to be able to download the programs that I was using, and I just had no way of doing that on the Chrome OS. So I had heard through my dad about this thing called dual booting. So I knew I would be able to dual boot Linux, or a modified version of it, onto my Chromebooks, which would allow me to download the things that I needed to download to get my process to actually work and for me to become more productive in school. So I broke my Chromebook in a sense, as now when I turn it on, it just beeps aggressively because it thinks it's a virus, but I did it on purpose, so I just ignore it. But it was super helpful in the long run, and that beeping is totally worth it, as I can actually do what I need to do in school. So I'm able to actually work on creating my skill in the classroom now rather than just my time at home, which I tend to be a little bit more productive in, so I have a little bit more time. And it also helped me in a lot of my general school stuff, which was an added bonus. So once I had my new computer, in a sense, I had no reason to not actually start creating my skill. But I kind of didn't really know where to go, so I in a sense had another roadblock. I knew I needed to start actually creating things because my deadlines were approaching and I was kind of just spinning around in circles, not doing too much. But I knew that I was not going to be able to do this without actually finding something to be more helpful. So I went back to my advice from the people at Mobiquity, and I went through their process because I knew I would at least be able to start doing that. And maybe once I started doing it, I thought I would be a lot more productive. So I came up with a goal. This took me an insanely long amount of time as I'm super indecisive and really struggle with making decisions. I would come up with a skill idea and I would be like, yep, this is what I'm doing. I'm super excited about this. And then I would decide, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I changed my mind and I would go back to the writing board and it was just super annoying. I actually have a story as to how I came up with the skill I was going to make. I was sitting at my friend Rachel's house with Rachel and Allie, and we had no idea what to do, which is a common occurrence with us. We really struggle with trying to figure out things to do after school, so we tend to just sit and stare at each other. And me and Rachel and Allie were really hoping to find something to do, and we really wished that we had somebody else to kind of tell us what to do. And that was when I had an idea spark in my head. I was like, wait, I'm looking for a skill to create, and we're looking for something to tell us what to do. I have an idea. And I was like, guys, what if I make a skill to make decisions for us on what we do after school? So I thought that was like the greatest thing ever, and I decided to roll with it. And it's pretty much a content skill as it is telling me things to do after school. It's delivering me content. So I made an outline for the skill. I was super excited about it, and I got started on it right as soon as I got back to school the next week. So I started off by saying what my invocation is. I decided to call my skill Activity Decider as I was not creative enough to come up with anything more exciting. If you have any ideas, let me know. And I also added my utterances, which tell me once I have my skill open, how it's going to know to actually try to find one of the outcomes, which are my activities. And when I open my skill and actually invoke it, it's going to randomly choose from my list of outcomes and tell me an activity to do. So once I had this done, I needed to start collecting feedback on my skill. So I went up to my friends and I was like, guys, what else should I add to this skill? I need your help. And most of my friends gave me answers that weren't quite school appropriate on activities I could add. But the ones that I could add, I ended up adding, and I got this new outline, which is the same except for I added more outcomes to my skill. And then I was stuck again because I needed to start coding and I had no idea how to do that. I had gotten through all this preliminary stuff and I was like, I need to actually start. So I was kind of motivated again, but also kind of stuck. All the deadlines were approaching, I was stressing out about them. And I kind of realized I needed something to help me get like where I needed to be. So my dad had told me, hey, you can come into my office, which is ADP, and they develop software there. So I was able to meet with a lot of software engineers and kind of figure out what they do in their day-to-day basis and how they actually get started with their coding and how they're troubleshooting their code. So that was extremely helpful as it was exactly what I needed. And I was able to see the whole process in what a team does, again, and give me more motivation to actually start my skill. So they told me about this thing called GitHub, which is basically a web-based tool for software developers. So like them and me, in my case, I used it to create my Amazon Alexa skill, and it makes it everything so much easier. At the baseline, I was able to use it as a way to collaborate with both my dad and Wesley and anybody else that wanted to work with me. But I also was able to use it as a source of version control. So anytime I would break my skill, I would be able to go back to when I knew it was working, which was super helpful because I broke my skill so many times. It just saved me so much time in the long run. And it also had this thing where I would be able to see what other people are doing, and it had tutorials on it, which is exactly what I needed at this point. It helped me learn how to write the code because it had everything all in one organized spot in one page. So I wasn't flipping back and forth as much, and it also had no accent as it was all written out, so I was able to understand it perfectly. And I just felt like it was a lot more targeted towards my project as well, as it was something that I had looked up specifically for the skill that I knew I wanted to make at this point. So I didn't feel like I was doing things that I felt like weren't super helpful towards my project. And I used it a lot throughout my actual skill after I went through my tutorial, as in I was able to fork the repository of the tutorial, which means that I'm able to make a copy for myself. When you fork the repository, which is like a giant folder worth of things that you need for your code, you are able to make your own, so any changes that you'll make to your repository do not change the original one, so you can actually do things and make changes and do cool stuff with it. And once I had my repository, I cloned it onto my computer so that I would be able to actually make the changes instead of just looking at my own version of what they had. And I was able to make the changes and push them back up into my repository because I was trying to make changes and actually do something with my skill. So that was super helpful. And if I was working with a team, I would then again push it back up to the central repository, but since I was working by myself and I did not know the people who had made the tutorial, I did not end up doing that, as I wasn't trying to request access for them or break their code. In order to do this, I needed to use a thing called Git Bash, which is what allowed me to use GitHub. It's something I installed on my computer, and it runs the same commands as Linux, which is what I ended up running on my Chromebook. And I already knew that because I was running it on my Chromebook, so it just made things a lot easier for me instead of having to move through all the Windows interfaces and do things about 10 times harder, I felt. And it makes it so that I can push my code or push it up or export it up into my repository, or I could pull my code or import it from my repository down into my computer. So it let me actually go through the process of creating a skill and making changes, so I wasn't just standing at a standpoint. And once I was here, I was really excited to start coding. I had the resources I needed to actually get done what I needed to get done. So I sat down quite like that and literally mashed into my keyboard. I was super excited. I finally knew what I was doing and how to do it. And I just sat down and I coded for like 4 hours straight. It pretty much ended up being me filling in their template and modifying it so that it would fit my skill, as I had decided to start heeding the advice that I had gotten from Mobiquity that I would not have enough time to make a skill completely from the bottom up, and I just ended up changing a lot of their things. So I would change the text that was being outputted, and I would change the variable names, so the things that go and tell my skill what to do. And so it would fit my skill that I was making a lot closer. And I didn't want to just do that, I also wanted to know what the skill was doing and what all the code meant. So I went through and commented the code, which is pretty much going line by line and saying what everything does, because I felt like it was cheating if I just went and took somebody else's work and changed a little bit of it, and I wanted to do it the real way. But this also took an extremely long time, and I was kind of unmotivated once I started working on it, because every time I would want to test out a change, it would take me like 5 minutes to do so, because I would need to go through this whole process of deleting files I didn't need, organizing them all into one place, zipping it up, uploading it up into Amazon, and then waiting. And I, for some reason, could not remember this process for my life, so I was always referencing my notes as to how I should actually do this. And I just felt like there had to be a better way to go about doing this, which is when I heard about Travis CI, which is a web-based continuous integration software, which lets me push my code up into my Amazon Developer Console, which is where all my code is being stored, and actually making it be able to run through Amazon Alexa. So this is super helpful because it would connect to my GitHub account, which is where I was already putting my code, so I would have a source of version control and I would be able to collaborate with other people. and it would just do everything for me. So I did not have to remember anything anymore. It just simplified everything so much, and I'll actually show you guys how this works later on. It also is super helpful in being able to test my code, as if it were not going to work, as in I had a simple code error that would catch, it would turn green where it's, it would turn red where it's green over here, and it would tell me I need to go back and fix something because my skill is not going to work at all. It's going to completely break. And once it was past that, I also had to test my skill in the Amazon Developer Console, as it was also needed, I also needed to see if I had typos or simple other fixes that would not be caught as grammatical or syntax errors in Travis CI. So when I had typos as to what I was doing, I would find them in the Developer Console. And it was also super cool to be able to use the Developer Console because it acts as a tiny little Alexa that is used for the developers. So I can actually try it out as people who would be using my skill in their day-to-day lives would be using it. And that brought me to the first version of my skill. Once I was here, I was actually getting somewhere, super excited about it, and I'll actually show you this version of my skill. So I ended up calling it old activity, so it would not clash with the new version of my skill. I say, Alexa, open old activity. Wait for this Parker Wi-Fi.
Here's your activity. Go through old pictures.
And if I do this a couple times, it's going to give me different activities from a list that I created.
Here's your activity. Go through old pictures.
That's not different. I'll do it again.
Here's your activity.
That's just bad luck. I'll do it one more time. See if I can get a different one.
Here's your
There you
activity.
I wanted it to be a secret.
And once I had this done, I had something to show my friends and say, hey guys, I want more feedback, how can I make this better? So I went to my friends, I got a lot more helpful answers this time, and they simply told me that they wanted me to add more choice in my skill. So I decided to add different types of activities that you could choose from. So the main ones that I focused on were inside activities and free activities. So depending on the type of activity you would ask for, you would get an activity that suited what you were asking for. In order to do this though, I needed to find another GitHub tutorial, as the one I was using before did not quite work. It only worked when I would invoke the skill rather than saying the utterances, and in order for me to actually get the complexity that I was looking for, I needed the utterances to work. So I went through the internet for a really long time. It really struggled with finding something that would help me actually create the skill I wanted to, but then I eventually found one, and I just ended up using an Alexa blueprint, which is not something that I wanted to do. Mobiquity had told me to do this, but after looking at it, it's just fill in the blanks. So I would literally just pick a blueprint, which they had an activity decider blueprint, and then I would fill in the blanks in their website, so I had no look at the code or anything, and then I would just have my skill. I did that in about 15 minutes, and it just didn't really feel right. So I ended up emailing Amazon and being like, hey, can I see the code for this? I'm trying to do this project and I didn't really have the experience needed when I went into it, but I'm really curious as to how it works. And they simply said, no, we can't show you it. So I was really mad. I had a couple weeks left until my presentation. I was just like, super stressed out about not getting it done on time. But I ended up getting it done. I went back to GitHub tutorials and I was able to find one that would work. I worked really closely with my dad. I actually ended up finishing my skill Wednesday night, so that was a little down to the wire and stressful. But I ended up getting it working, and it actually went a little bit simpler than I had previously planned. So I ended up just having the utterances, and then based on the utterance that I give, it gives me an activity that I wanted to do, whereas before I wanted to have a little back and forth conversation. But I ended up kind of running out of time, as I literally finished this on Wednesday. But I got it to work, and I can show it to you. So, Alexa, open activity decider.
Try asking for something more specific, like give me something free from Activity Decider.
And then she tells me to ask for something more specific since I have different types of skills. So I need to focus so I type it correctly.
Here's your free activity. Go on and hide.
So she can tell me free activities, or I can tell her to give me something indoors from Activity Decider, and she'll tell me an indoor activity.
Here's your indoor activity.
So you can see
Play
it's
video
different
games.
as I have it say free activity and indoor activity. Many of the activities ended up being the same because I didn't have an exhaustive list of them, but it was pretty cool still nonetheless. And I can actually go here so I don't lose my track. I'm going to show you how to actually do this. So if anybody on my panel has an idea of an activity that I can add to my skill, I would love to add it. So does anybody have any ideas? Could be anything. It doesn't have to be an activity, just a phrase.
Basketball.
Basketball?
Play basketball.
Play basketball. So I play basketball to here. And this is going to take a minute to actually load up. So I'm just going to go through it and then I'll go back and explain it. So now it should be working. I committed my activity from my code. So this is actually my code. You can see it. I tried to comment it so you can see in the gray here. So this part is basically my basic Amazon commands. So this is telling me what my skill name is, what my fact message is, my help message, things like that that I need to have a skill that would work and meet Amazon requirements. I then listed out all of my activities in a list. So here are my free activities. I have bake cookies, make macaroni art, cry, things like that. And then I also have my indoor activities, and then you just saw me add my exhibition activity. And then below this, I have a bunch of basic Amazon things that make the skill work. It's telling me here to randomly choose an activity from the list that I had specified based on the invocation that you were uttering, and then it will speak it out using the speech command. And then below it, it's just Amazon handler stuff and telling Amazon what to do if my skill doesn't actually go forward. So that's that. You can see here, this is my GitHub account. So this is where I'm storing all of my Alexa skill stuff, so you can see all of the different files I have. So if I refresh this, it should say that we actually made a change 2 minutes ago. So we made a change 2 minutes ago in the Alexa folder, which is where this is. And then this change, once it's up here, should be going in here. We'll see if it updated. Alright, so it already went, so I missed it. But basically what happened was this went and it turned yellow and told me that I was trying to make change number 38 to what I was doing. If it were to fail, it would turn red, but luckily it did not fail, it turned green, and then I can demo it for you here. So there's actually a little bit of a bug in the developer console right now, so I have to go back and do some little loopholes to try to get it to work. But I'll try my best here. Sometimes it takes a little bit. So I will go back here, do a little craziness. And then if I say, give me an exhibition activity from Activity Decider, there's a chance that it will give us Tommy's activity.
Here's your exhibition activity.
This is not
Snap your
it.
fingers thrice.
I can try to do it, I'll do it a couple times.
Here's your exhibition activity.
It's not very
Snap your
random
fingers
today.
thrice. Here's your exhibition activity.
We're getting there.
Congratulatory remark.
Let's see if we get it this time.
Here's your exhibition
All
activity.
Trust me, it's in there. One more.
Here's your
At least she's made up her mind. But once I had this done, I had taken all this time, I was super excited about it, I could technically publish my skill, which I did not get up to doing as I had finished it again on Wednesday. And I wasn't completely done with it. I would still like to continue making changes before I put it up on the store, but it is something that I plan on doing over the summer when I have more time. It would take about 1 to 2 weeks for me to actually hear back onto whether or not it gets published, because it goes through a committee of real live people, which I thought was really cool. And they basically have to go through all of their skill guidelines to make sure I meet them. So the skill has to have all of the default Amazon skill things. It needs to meet family guidelines, things like that. And my product was a little different than I had originally planned. I originally planned on making it just my Amazon Alexa skill, but since I did so much stuff behind the scenes, I felt like it didn't fully encapsulate what I had done throughout my year. So I decided with my advisor that I would be making a My Process article. So I made an article called How I Created My Amazon Alexa Skill. I'll read the first paragraph or two out of this, but I'm not going to keep reading it as it's pretty much just my whole presentation summed up in another way. So the first page of my introduction, I say, for my senior project, I studied how to create an Amazon Alexa skill. I created a skill, but as I am Ava, I went on tangents not specifically related to my original goal of making a complex skill. I decided to focus more on the general program aspects of creating a skill, but under the guise of Amazon Alexa, as it was something I had never done before, and I loved the idea of my friends being able to use what I had created. I also had a cool idea for a skill to make me decide on activities for me to do, because I'm a super indecisive person, and I know a lot of people who struggle with making decisions as well. It also seemed fun to have something lighthearted to code. Since I ended up focusing a lot on the back end of coding, I decided to make this how-to article better by specifying the work as I did in my experiential learning. I ended up reading a lot of separate how-to guides in my process, but they all only covered one specific topic. And I wanted to be able to encapsulate my entire process in one place, making it easier for others to create their own skill. I'll let you guys can read it if you would like. And I'm going to relate this back to my essential question at the beginning. How did I make an Amazon Alexa skill? So as I learned throughout my process, it's not really all about the skill. There's a lot of things that have to go on in the background. A lot of it being a lot of tangents. So I originally was going to just make a skill, and I was just going to make a super complex thing, but it didn't end up working out that way, because I had learned how to use GitHub and Travis CI to make my life easier in the long run, which I'm super, super glad I ended up doing. I also learned the importance of collaboration and hard work, as if I had not collaborated with anyone during my project, I would not have a skill today. And I learned how to Google things really well, because again, I hit a lot of setbacks, and I learned that coding is really just knowing what to Google and how to read it. So I learned how to do that super well. I really love Google. And I learned that time management is super important. I probably shouldn't be waiting until the Wednesday before my exhibition to try to get my skill done. I wish I had done it sooner, but it is what it is. I'd also really like to thank all the people who've helped me along the way, as I literally would not be standing up here without any of them. I would like to thank Julie Marin from the Mobiquity team for getting me started on what to do and giving me a really cool experience in an Amazon Alexa skill team. I'd also like to thank Wesley Moreno, the ITEI, for helping to keep me on track and helping me find articles when I got stuck. I'd like to thank my dad and the people at his office, ADP, for helping me also get unstuck, and my dad specifically for staying up late nights at like 11:30, just coding frantically at my computer. And I'd like to extend a huge thanks to Debbie, my advisor, because she pushed me to keep going and going even when I kind of wanted to give up. And I was just super grateful for that, and I'm glad that I was able to actually get something I was super proud of done. Questions?
So the panel has the opportunity to ask questions now.
Hi. Great job, by the way.
Thank you.
One of my questions was, so at the beginning you described some of the drawbacks or cons of developing an app for your iPhone. I was wondering, having done all this, if there are any cons or negatives to having chosen Alexa?
The main thing I can think of is the lack of articles to try to get stuff done. Amazon really tries to make a lot of stuff to help me in my process, and they have it all in one place. But as I found, a lot of the things I was trying to use weren't fully fleshed out, and sometimes they didn't work at all. And I feel like if I had done iPhone app development, it would have been a lot more easy, for me to find things to help me out, and actually, I feel like I would have not had as much time spinning around trying to figure out how to do things.
Ava, you ran into a lot of roadblocks and setbacks. Can you tell me what your process was to sort of work through those from like a practical point of view? And then also what you need to do to sort of emotionally work through and persist?
Well, first I would get kind of frustrated, but that's just part of the process of creating any type of program. Nothing's ever going to work perfectly the first time, which I definitely learned in this process. But I really just learned the importance of actually reaching out to people who I know could help me, which I don't really like to do. I like to kind of just stay by myself and work silently in my room, completely blocking off the rest of the world. But in order to get where I am today, I needed to actually ask people for help. So I learned the importance of asking people for help, because I do not have a lot of the expertise that the professionals have around me, and they're definitely able to help me with that.
So you talked a lot about how you wanted, or you didn't talk a lot, you talked about how you wanted to publish potentially, but you said you wanted to make some changes to the program. What specific areas of the program would you want to change or develop before you get published?
The main thing I would want to do is add a lot more variation in the activities that I had. The activities I had pretty much were very similar down the lines, as I didn't have a lot of time to think about how to actually make super specific activities. And I'd also like to add different types of activities, so I'd like to add outdoor activities, just a general activity list, things like that, just to have it have more content. Hi.
Hi, if you could, do you think you'll continue working with Amazon Scale and creating other types of skills, and if so, what would that be?
I'm not sure if I'd stick with Amazon specifically, but I know I want to keep programming in the future. I definitely want to finish the skill that I started just because I'm so close to actually finishing it, but I know that I'm going to be using a lot of Python over the summer to make my own programs and stuff, which I'm going to be able to draw on experiences that I had creating this skill to make that go a lot smoother, but not probably Amazon Alexa skills specifically.
So when you were first starting out, you talked about how you went to talk to different people and they gave you advice and you decided not to heed that advice.
Yeah.
So what did you learn about when you were asking about when you get advice? What would you do differently? What would you change? How did that shape you?
Well, the professionals probably know more than me, than amateur knows. I didn't really like listening to them because I thought, oh, I have like great time management, which didn't really end up being super true this year. And I was super dedicated and excited about what I was doing. I was ready to spend a bunch of time actually creating stuff, and I wasn't expecting all of the setbacks that I would have. But they knew what they were talking about, and I definitely should have listened to them because they're experiencing the same setbacks as me, definitely. Probably not as many, as this is something that they're doing every single day for like their living. So I wish that I had actually listened to what they had told me, and I should stop just thinking that I know everything when the professionals are telling me otherwise.
Yeah, but just sometimes you get to think outside the box.
Yeah.
That requires a real balance.
Yep.
I wanted to know, so are you interested in being a developer, and
Yeah.
did this give you encouragement along that track? Do you feel, I mean, you overcame a lot.
Yeah.
I was writing down the list of things you were overcoming, was quite good, so how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, I'm actually going to college for computer science. I was inspired by my dad, and I've been doing little things my entire life, like little tiny programs, but I've never done anything this big. And I'm definitely a lot more inspired. I'm super excited to actually start learning more about it and starting more in a structured way, in a smaller scope, so that I feel like I'm not going to just be like starting all the way at the top. I'm excited to actually kind of understand more of what I'm actually doing. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Maybe you can talk a little bit more Amazon Developer Console is set up so that someone like me, because I went through, you made me set up my account and I did all the different things to follow what you were doing. And it very much is plug and play in a lot of ways. It's fill in the blank so that pretty much anyone who sort of has an idea that can fit into one of Amazon's preset categories can just go ahead and do it. You really pushed out against that. You thought it was cheating, and so can you just talk a little bit about the importance to you of being able to do the coding and understand what's going on as opposed to just, like you could have just created a skill using one of the other blueprints and been satisfied with that and probably could have done several others, right, in the process. So why is that, understanding that coding piece so important to you?
Well, I came into this project, the main thing that I came in the school year knowing I wanted to do my senior project on was the code itself, and I really like understanding how things work. It really bothers me when something just exists and there's like no explanation as to how it works, or nobody wants to explain to me. It just bothers me, and I didn't want to have my senior project do the same thing, so I just felt like that was completely against me. And again, I was super, super interested in the code, so I knew that this would be a good place for me to be able to learn a lot of what I wanted to learn. And I didn't want to just skip out on it and miss out on an opportunity.
One last question. So, I love the topic for the skill, and given all the decisions that you were forced to make along the way, I'm wondering how this might have affected your decision-making process as a person.
I feel like it's probably about the same. I learned a little bit, but probably not as much as I should have. So I knew going into this that there were going to be a lot of setbacks. That's just something that happens with any type of coding or programming. I guess the main thing that I took away, again, is that I should listen to people. They know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, and it would just be more helpful in the long run. And also, again, talking to people, super important, because they can help me when I get stuck, and I shouldn't just sit there and be confused when I can get out of it.
All right, the panel has an opportunity to offer some more feedback before we go to our deliberations. Anyone can start?
I just wanted to say, I loved, along the way, I was keeping track of the things that you were overcoming, not being able to get Twitch to work, and downloading VPN, and having to load Linux, and all of it. I mean, it just was really great. I really admired that. Good job.
For me, it felt like a story. The way you were telling it definitely felt like in the very beginning, the middle, and the end. And so I was thinking, wow, this must have been very well documented, because this entire time it felt like it was very logical, all the sequences of all the events that happened.
Making my product definitely helped with that, it's just planning out everything that I need to put in here.
I love how you were honest about your process. We've kind of been touching on that, but I think that also leads to having a presentation style that's very natural and casual and very engaging for people to listen to. Thank you.
I thought the presentation was really fun and entertaining, and it was a topic that I didn't know much about. I learned a whole lot, and I thought your oral presentation skills were really good, and I was very impressed. And overall, you did a really good job of product. I did a lot of work.
I think you did a great job presenting, and I think that what I read for me is your resiliency and like wanting to see this in the end. And you got it done. It doesn't matter if it was the night before or whatever, you got it done, and that's the important thing. You kept your foot on the gas and you got it done, so congratulations.
I'm super proud of you, and I'm glad that you got to this point with your project and been able to share it with everyone. I do love in your presentation that other people have said that we really got a sense of the whole process that you went through and how you worked through the challenges that you faced and persevered in the face of those challenges. I loved your use of stories. I love that you coded for us. I like that you did the different iterations of your skill, and then you showed us like, here, I'm going to actually go into this code and show you how we can change it. And I thought that was really helpful to see, in the background of what you did.